Hello and welcome. In my last video I discussed the major differences between the preset setups in ACC to try and help people better understand what to expect from each setup and which one to use. If you're interested in that and haven't already seen it, I will leave a link to it in the description. Today I wanted to make a nice and short video about brakes, what effect they have on the car and how you can make adjustments to help get the car working well for you. I'm using ACC here, but honestly the same principles do apply to all racing sims. Full disclosure, this video is not aimed at people looking for expert setups or highly technical details, but if you do match that description, then please feel free to share any tips and wisdom down in the comments. So whether you're looking to modify one of the provided setups or start from scratch, understanding how brake settings can affect the car is pretty important. For the record, I don't claim to be an expert at setting up cars, far from it in fact, but hopefully I can share some useful info. So let's start with brake bias. Brake bias refers to the ratio of brake force being applied to the front and the rear of the car. Most cars, both race and road cars, will have a frontward bias. This is because, due to boring science things, when you brake, a lot of the car's weight is transferred to the front of the vehicle. When that happens, you want more braking force at the front and need less at the rear. Due to excellent engineering things, race cars handle the transfer of weight a little better than road cars, but will still generally require a frontward bias. Getting the ratio incorrect can actually have some significant impacts on the way the car handles. Moving the bias further forward can give the car more stopping power, which leads to you getting maximum potential deceleration. This means you can brake later, which leaves you to stay on the happy pedal longer. But it can also lead to a number of handling and stability issues. The most obvious is going to be the front wheels locking up. Now of course this still isn't always due to bias. It could be that you're braking too late or simply standing on the brake pedal too hard, but let's leave driving competencies out of the video and focus on the setups. So even if you don't lock up when braking in a straight line, you may find that it locks as soon as you start to turn and restricts your ability to trail brake, meaning applying a small amount of brake right up until you reach mid-corner to help the turn in. Any of these symptoms could mean that your bias is too far forward, so try moving it back a little bit. Let's now discuss what you can expect if your bias is too far to the rear. Well, much like the front end, if you have too much bias at the back, your rear wheels will lock up. This is the kind of problem that will really ruin your day in a single corner. It's essentially like pulling the handbrake on. It's extremely difficult to regain control no matter your skill and experience, but luckily this issue won't take you very long to diagnose. A less extreme example might see the rear end suddenly step out when you start to turn under brakes. An even more subtle example could be the rear feeling a bit wriggly under brakes, or the car backs it into the corner a little bit, meaning the rear is sort of hanging out the side a little bit when you're still braking in a straight line, which will make your turn-in be a slower process and is generally less stable. Now as a general rule, you want to try and have as much forward bias as you and the car can effectively handle to maximise stopping power. To find the right balance, even at the cost of raw braking power, will ultimately be the fastest option. This of course sounds great and a little obvious if I'm being honest, but executing perfect balance in a race car is never easy. There is no perfect bias ratio. It's going to change depending on the car, the track, the tyre compound, the temperatures, the fuel load, and of course the driver. A rear engine car, for example, has a lot more weight over the rear axle and will respond much better to a rearward brake bias than a front engine car. The same goes for a car full of fuel. In fact, a lot of real life racers will actually move the bias further forward throughout the race as the fuel and therefore the weight over the rear axle decreases. Other points of note when it comes to bias: if you have too much bias at one end of the car, it will have a corresponding impact on tyre wear, tyre temperatures and brake temperatures. Something to bear in mind if you're in an endurance race. Now unfortunately, when it comes to your car's balance, brake bias doesn't exist in a vacuum where it's the only thing that plays a part in stability. So adjusting the bias alone may not bring the fixes you're after. Suspension also plays a part in braking stability. If the front end seems to wander all over the road, you may need to stiffen the front suspension up. If the track is bumpy and you lock up over those bumps, you may need to increase the rebound. but I don't want to overcomplicate this or go into suspension settings. The best way to get your bias right is to simply get out there and test. ACC already gives you 2 setups to choose from. Once you've selected one that you're most comfortable with, have a go at tweaking the bias. Move it forward until it locks, move it back until you lose the rear end, and try and find a happy medium. I would recommend against looking for a magic number online, because depending on the car's setup and the way you drive, someone else's bias could be totally wrong for you. It's always hard not to bounce around too much in these types of videos, contradict myself or overcomplicate them, veer off in other directions, but hopefully you were able to get something out of this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider hitting a like, leave a dislike if you didn't enjoy it, and consider subscribing and turning the bell on to get notified of more of my videos. Thank you very much for watching, thank you to my VIPs, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now. Did you know that I mainly live stream over on Twitch? I could be live right now and you didn't even realise, so head on over, say hi, and if I'm not online, you hit follow and the bell so you do know when I'm live next. Alright, speak soon, legends.